Did you know that this is what people think when they hear the word learning disabilities? This is kind of what they think. They say, okay, about 70% of people connect learning disabilities with what used to be called mental retardation, but now the terminology, by the way, is intellectual disability, okay? We don't call them mentally retarded anymore. They're intellectually disabled. They confuse it with intellectual disability and autism. 70%. Over half, if you were to poll an audience, over half of the people would say, oh, that's laziness. It's a lack of motivation. Parents often with kids with learning disabilities, when their child begins exhibiting problems in school, this is their thing. They will often tend to ignore it because they'll be like, oh, I'm just going to kind of wait and see if they grow out of it. Yeah. And what's really scary, because this impacts you, many educators, even though many of them don't really know what a learning disability really is, they say, oh, I'm comfortable teaching somebody who has a learning disability. So this is where I'm coming from, especially in the Christian school, the private school sector. My experience has been that this issue is not dealt with appropriately. And it gets me really worked up because these kids can learn. They just need a teacher who will help them learn, okay? The public school sees it. They've seen it for 25, 30 years now. They have seen it. They give these kids services. They give them the supports they need. And on the other end, the kids succeed most of the time. But for whatever reason, Christian schools have not been willing, or maybe just haven't been able, or don't have the education, whatever have you, to address the issue, and that's why I'm here today. I'm here to address the issue. So, what would you say? Do you think learning disabilities are real, or are they perceived? Okay, they're real. Did you know that there is, the thought is out there that it's all in the brain, it's all in the head? It's like kind of this mental, you know, like you're wacko kind of a thing. Some people think that. How are they identified?
Teacher sees it, sometimes sends it to the doctor, sometimes sends it to the parent.
Okay. Okay, so it depends, really. Sometimes, and did you know that more often than not with kids that are in school, that the teacher's the one that sees it first? Sees the red flags, and we're going to talk about red flags today. Good. This is now a tricky question. Can kids or children or adults with learning disabilities grow out of them? No, they can't. Once you have a learning disability, you always have a learning disability. But we can teach you how to cope with it. We can teach you strategies to compensate for that disability. Once you have a disability, learning-wise, it's a neurological disorder. You always have it, but we can teach you how to cope in spite of it. Are learning disabilities and intellectual disability the same? They are not. They're two very different things. An intellectual disability is usually defined by somebody who has an IQ score of 70 or 65-ish, depending where you're looking at the definition, or below. That would be an intellectual disability. And often you're going to find that kids with learning disabilities sometimes are off the charts, IQ speaking. They're very, very smart. They just don't do it like the rest of the class. they don't manifest, they don't show their understanding and their awareness, their learning, their knowledge in ways that other kids do. They're like your little alternate drummers, okay? Everybody's over here drumming like this, and then here's little Johnny drumming over there in whatever way he figures, I don't know, what works for him. Okay, so that's kind of what we're talking about with learning disabilities. You know, I'm very, oops, I should have already said that, sorry. I'm used to having a clicker, so I'm kind of like, feel weird. I'm a mover when I talk, so this, I feel chained, but I will get over it. Here we go. There's some startling statistics, okay? As of 2014, 2.5 million children in the United States had learning disabilities, specific learning disability. 2.5 million children. That's a boatload of kids in case you didn't know that. It's a boatload. Now let's kind of bring it home to where you are. We believe that about 10 to 20% of students in your classrooms, 10 to 20% of them have specific learning disabilities. If you were to step into your typical public school, the statistics now tell you all of the research, all of the data, current 2015, 2016 are saying at least 10% of your kids have a learning disability in your classroom. And the average public school classroom is between 30 and 35 little kiddos. So you're looking at 3 to 4 kids in one classroom with one teacher. That's a lot. It's a lot. They're sitting in your classrooms right now. You have them. You may not know how to recognize them right now, or you may think there's something like kind of a little off. I'm not sure what it is, but okay, you know, and that means you're a good educator. That means you're a good educator. So we're going to talk today, okay, how can you really identify them? How prevalent are they in the private school? They're prevalent, okay? They're there. It can be assumed that there is a healthy slice of little kiddos with these problems sitting in your classrooms, sitting in your assemblies, sitting in your chapels, sitting in your schools, and they are not getting the help maybe that they need. So I got to get a little technical here, okay? Sorry, I'm a special ed teacher, and I teach special ed to college students, and sometimes you got to get technical to understand something. So we're going to talk about the technicality of what learning disabilities is, and I know I'm going to put you to sleep doing this, and I apologize. But then I'm going to put it in your real English, okay? So let's look at IDEA 2004. In case you didn't know, IDEA 2004 is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. It was first passed in 1997. It is a kind of a trunket of the Education for All Handicapped Children Act that was first passed in 1975, which was the first federal law that passed for special education in public schools. Then 1997, it was done over, and they really revamped it, and then 2004 it was, so this is this definition, and that is like really horrible because you can't see it. What on earth? Is there a light? Is there a light we could turn off maybe back there? It's really just, I've never had that problem before. It might be that the projector is not very strong. Whatever. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. So, IDEA 2004, and this is the federal special education law that still stands. Okay, so 12 years later, IDEA, that's much better, thank you. IDEA 2004 is it. They say this is what a specific learning disability is. And by the way, I see people taking pictures. Listen, I will give you my email address at the end of the thing if you want it, and I'm happy to email whomever. So just remind me to tell you what my email address is, and I'll do that. And you can write it down. You can email me personally, and I will give you a copy of this. You can have it. Okay, so a specific learning disability, according to federal legal jargon, it's a disorder in one of the basic psychological, or you could also say neurological, processes involved in understanding or using language. It is a language disorder, essentially, okay? It may manifest itself in these ways: hard time listening, thinking, speaking, reading, writing, spelling, math, blah, blah, blah. It includes such things as perceptual disabilities, brain injuries, minimal brain dysfunction, dyslexia, and developmental aphasia. Developmental aphasia is a verbal disorder when somebody gets a knock on the head, or they have a brain injury in a car accident and their speech gets all muddled. That's developmental, that's aphasia, essentially. Now, this is so, what does that mean? Okay, let's talk about it. So let's get down to what we're talking. It is not this, because I like to learn about things that are not. It is not a learning problem that is the result of a visual problem. So they've got blindness or something going on. A hearing problem, so if they've got hearing problems, we can't, generally speaking, diagnose them with a learning disability. Motor disabilities, which means motor means movement, okay? Intellectual disability, notice, okay? Emotional disturbance, and let me kind of go off my script here a little bit. If you know anything about the public schools, emotional behavior disorder is rising to the top of special ed disabilities right now. Learning disabilities is the biggest one now. EBD is just overtaking the public schools. The behavior problems that are in the public school, it's crazy what these teachers are dealing with. If you know teachers that are public school teachers, you need to befriend them. Put your arm, they need encouragement. I'm telling you, you want to talk about you think you're in the trenches. They are in the trenches, my friends. This is very difficult work. Just a little side note. Or of environmental, in other words, that they're abused or anything like that, cultural or economic disadvantage. So it can't be any of those things. So let's put it in plain English, okay? In plain English, they are persistently having troubles in reading, writing, math, or math reasoning during formal years of schooling. Most of the time, a kid with learning disabilities, it manifests itself, it comes to fruition usually by about 4th grade. And I'll tell you, we'll talk about that a couple slides down. Persistent difficulties in this. If you're thinking, maybe you're thinking of a little kiddo in your class that for whatever, you could sit there till the cows come home and, quiz them on math facts. 2 times 2, but you could do everything, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't stick in their little heads. Their academic skills are well below the average range of scores in culturally appropriate tests of reading, because we have a lot of ESL students in our country, so we've got to make sure we're giving them tests that are culturally appropriate, that they can actually understand, so that they are taking the test well. And the red, the well below the average range, let me tell you something, Christian school teachers, it's not your average, it's national average, okay? Your average is not the same as the national average. Generally speaking, the Christian school average is above. So just be aware of that. Difficulty is not better explained by other things like vision, hearing, motor, things like that. That's what we said earlier. So this is the definition. Okay, so what does that mean for me? What should you, as an educator, be looking for? Can you look for things? Yeah, you can. Some of these symptoms would include things like inaccurate or slow and effortful reading. You get a little guy and you give him a little early reader, and they can't read the sentence Dick sees Jane. They spend all of their energy on individual letters. D, I, k, s, e, s. And then if you go ask him what he just read, does he know what he just read? No, because all of his mental energy went to doing what? Decoding those letters. That phonemic awareness, they're lost, and their comprehension skills usually are very, very low because of that. So reading, probably number one. Biggest red flag is reading. Big time. Number one, up at the top. They struggle with reading, it's a red, okay, listen, please understand my language here. If they struggle with reading, it is a red flag, okay? I am not saying, well, if they struggle with reading, they have a learning disability. No, I am not saying, some kids are just late developers, and that's okay. But it's something for you to be aware of, to go, ooh, I need to be watching this. I need to be watching this. What about this one? They have poor written expression that lacks clarity. Some of these little buggers they just don't know how to get it out. They have a lot of good ideas in their head, but they can't get it down on paper. Or they write on paper and you're reading it and going, this don't make no sense. Where are you going here? You have to ask them to translate for you. It's a red flag. It's a red flag. Number facts. This is another one. They have come out with a new term, a math learning disability. It is called let me go back here. Dyscalculia. Dysgraphia is the writing one. Sorry. Sometimes my brain gets ahead of me here. Dyscalculia. So that makes sense because it's calculations often that they struggle with. For whatever reason, they cannot memorize the math facts. They can't get it. Your typical child, probably by 2nd grade, is going to know their addition math facts, I would think, okay? And for whatever reason, some of these kids just don't get it. And then they also struggle with reasoning in math. let me say this. Learning disabilities are real and they are permanent. Some of these little kiddos, especially in the Christian school environment. My kids are in the Christian school. I love the Christian school. I am pro-Christian school. I can't think of any better place for my children to get an education. But sometimes Christian schools are not compassionate when it comes to these little kiddos that learn differently. And we should be the ones who are the most compassionate. And that's what gets me going. So we have got to recognize, okay, there are some kiddos that really have learning problems. They have issues. Listen, not everybody is going to be at the top of the A game, okay? And so if you're a good educator, and I'm going to make a blanket statement here, and I'm going to be very dogmatic about it. If you're an educator and you couldn't care less about your students succeeding in your class, you need to check your heart, my friend. You're not a true educator then. Get out of the classroom. And I know that sounds really mean, but I mean it. We need teachers who are interested in kids succeeding. I'm not saying everybody gets an A. I'm not for the whole thing that everybody gets a trophy. I'm not into that. In fact, I think that's really bad for our society. I am into, having a kid actually get a C if he can get a C, okay? Let him feel I did something. But some of these kids live their lives in failure. Failure after failure. They feel marginalized. They feel belittled. Their teachers put them down. Their parents put them down. Their siblings put them down in the classroom. And they feel stupid. And you know what happens to these kids? They reject Christianity when they get out of school. Because we have not lived a Christian life in front of them. How sad. How sad. Okay, that's my soapbox for the day. Not really. So I'm going to give you a little, we're gonna see what it feels like to be a kid with a learning disability in the classroom. And I'm gonna get real technical here and try to cover this up. I try to be a teacher. I want y'all to see what I'm doing up here, So this was embedded in my PowerPoint, but for whatever reason, the internet's being really weird. So the guy who is, let me set this up for you. The guy who is in this video, his name is Richard Lavoie. He has done a series of workshops. He did them back in the early 90s. This is from the early 90s, and they look funny, and they look like from the early 90s. He is a leader in the field of learning disabilities. I highly respect his approach and how he teaches about learning disabilities. And he's got a classroom of teachers, and he's teaching them what it means to be a kid with a learning disability, how it feels, essentially, in the classroom. So I'm going to set it up. It's just a couple minutes long, and then we're going to talk about it when it's done. Yeah, see? Let's all get our giggles out. Ah, they look like from the 80s. They do. Let's hope this works. Cross our fingers. Hold on here. Oh, there it is. Okay.
What color is the booklet, Carol?
Blue.
What's it say in the front of the booklet, Kit?
City.
What's it stand for, Carolyn? What does it stand for, Carolyn?
I don't know.
What is it? It says at the bottom of the book. What's it stand for, Maria?
Frustration, anxiety, and tension.
It's frustration, anxiety, and tension. What kind of animals top of the page, Carol?
Bird.
Turn to the next page. What color is the first page, Jane?
Blue.
What does it say in the first page, Carol? The first page, Carol. Earth to Carol, come in, please. The first page. Earth to Carol, come in, please. Raise your hand if you thought that was funny. Yeah, everybody likes that except who?
Carol.
Except Carol. Anytime you as a teacher or a parent decide to use sarcasm with kids, understand that you created a victim. Now that little throwaway line that I threw at Carol, I will forget within 5 minutes, you will forget within 5 minutes, but it's very likely to stay with Carol for the rest of the day. Those little throwaway sarcasms we use. Jody, what color's the print in the first page? What does it say, Lee?
Activity 1.
Was that what it says, Stephanie?
Yes.
Turn to the next page. What color's the next page, Lee?
Yellow.
What kind of animal's top of that page, Jody?
Tiger.
That's not a tiger. Carol, what kind of animal's top of that page?
A cat.
It's a cat. Famous story with the catnip, Maria. Famous story with the catnip. Famous story with the catnip, Maria. Famous story with the catnip. Give me one famous story with the catnip, Maria. Okay, does anxiety affect performance? Does anxiety affect performance? Of course it does. According to this, Maria doesn't know one story with a cat in it. Give Maria a call tomorrow, she'll give you 30 of them. But in this situation, with the anxiety we've created already, with the anxiety that we've created in a short period of time, Maria's unable to get that information out. Famous story of the cat in the car.
3 little kittens.
Famous story of the cat in the Debbie.
Garfield.
Famous story of the cat in the car.
Incredible Journey.
Famous story of the cat in Kelly. Melissa. Karen. Kim. Merritt. Okay, let's take a look at what's happened now. I accepted the answer, I don't know, from Kelly. What were the next 4 answers that I got in a row? I don't know. See, we have to really put this under a microscope and look at this. You people have been learning disabled now for 6 minutes, and many of you have quit. Not 6 years, not 16 years, the way the LD child lives, but 6 minutes. And many of you, once I began accepting the answer, I don't know, how many of you decided if he calls on me, I'm going to say I don't know? Raise your hand. Yeah. Many of you have decided if he's going to accept I don't know as an answer, I'm going to stop trying to think of a response and I'll just say I don't know. Okay, Jody, what kind of animal is that? Top of the page again?
Cat.
Down below, what kind of animal is that, Lee?
Duck.
Stephanie, what kind of noise did the duck make?
Quack.
Famous story of the duck and a Nancy? Famous story of the duck and a Karen? You were ready for me, weren't you, Nancy? Famous story of the duck and a Karen? Famous story with the duck in it, come on. Famous story with the duck in it. One famous story with the duck in it, Karen. Famous story with the duck in it. It doesn't take a lot of thought, Karen. Famous story with the duck in it. One famous story with the duck in it. Nancy knew one.
Yeah, well, Nancy's better than I am. I can't think.
Debbie, famous story with the duck in it. Famous story with the duck in it.
Okay, let me put my little paper here so you don't see what I'm doing. Let me ask you a few questions as we come back to our little chat together. What kinds of feelings did... What just happened there? Uh-oh. Okay, see, technology is it's not my friend right now. Sorry. It just continued on. Okay, well, here we go. How did that make you feel? I heard anxious. What else? Frustration. I'm sorry? Defeated, nervous, insignificant, fearful, embarrassed. Good. Yeah. Could you empathize with those students? How many of you have ever been in a situation like that, like for real, in real life? I remember teachers being like that when I was in school, growing up, and I would be like, and I don't have a disability. I never have. Pretty bright. Usually, I'm pretty quick on my feet. But I remember sitting there, and then I felt it for the rest of the day. Did you see yourself in that video anywhere? As the student, or as the teacher? Did you ever hear yourself doing that? What could he have done differently? Slow down. I don't know if you remember going back to the definition of learning disabilities. One of the main truncats is it's a processing problem. What does processing mean? Okay, how you take in information and how you get it out again. And what happens with these little kiddos with learning disabilities, their hearing is just fine. Their seeing is, so it's coming in through all their little 5 senses just fine. But something happens. It gets in their brain and it gets lost. Or they don't find a filing system that matches it. Or they put it in the wrong file. Where they can't, and then when they go to get that information again, they can't. Or they get the wrong piece of information and they say the wrong thing. My son, I am very passionate about kids with disabilities because I have one who has one. See, it's coming from a mom too. I'm a teacher and I'm a mom. And I got passionate. We used to joke about it because our son, he's a slow processor at times. And we'd be sitting around the dinner table. We're all talking. My son now is 14. My oldest is 16. And my daughter, those are my 2 boys. And then my daughter is 11. But we have a great time sitting around talking at dinner. And we'd be all talking about something. And here's my little Trey over here. He's not talking. But I know he's in some world thinking about something. I have no idea. And then all of a sudden, we're all talking about something over here, and Trey interjects. And it is something completely off topic. Because he's been over here thinking about this. and not processing what we're talking about. He's processing his own little thing. And my husband, it's kind of our running joke. You know, my husband Jeff will look at me and go, "Another random thought by Trey." You know, it's just, but that's what they do sometimes. They cannot, this guy was talking a million miles a minute. Now I'm from Pennsylvania, so I talk really fast, and I resonate with this kind of thing. But these kids can't process that information as fast as this guy is giving it. And then on top of that, he's going, and they're going, you know, and forget it. You know, recall is going to be like next to nothing, if anything, for that. So it's good for you to know what it feels like as a teacher with a kid, as a kid with learn, what that all the eyes on you, the feeling of I'm not good enough, the feeling I'm frustrated, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm whatever, I don't measure up. Rest assured, though, early identification, I believe, is number one for these kiddos. My son was diagnosed at age 3 with autism. They originally diagnosed him with autism. We went through multiple doctors in school, and we actually entered him to the public school at age 3 because they could provide him services that he needed. He at age 3, he knew a few words. He could talk a few words. He did not put 2 sentences together until he was 6 and a half. He just was developmentally delayed on so many levels. And I really attribute that early identification, getting him in school, getting him social help, getting him speech and language, occupational therapy. To this day, he still can't hold a pencil. He struggles with fine motor skills. He has to, when he writes, he holds the pencil in this hand and he uses this hand to kind of, you know, push it along. They have since reneged on the diagnosis of autism. They believe he just has a developmental disorder, essentially, that manifests itself sometimes in some processing difficulties. Early identification is key for these kids. The earlier we can catch them, the better the chance for success down the road. I'm not saying we're going to eradicate it. It's just not a possibility. But we can teach them strategies to cope and to compensate for their disability. So let's talk about some early warning signs, and I will, as you're leaving, I will provide you with a handout for these warning signs, okay? Preschool, K through 4th, and what to do if you suspect that somebody has a learning disability. So make sure that I get those out and I don't forget because I'm an airhead. So let's talk a little bit. Early warning sign, and remember these are red flags. I'm not saying yes, this definitely means they have a learning disability. I'm just saying this is a major red flag that you as educators, you need to be aware of these things so that you can communicate appropriately with your parents especially, okay? So number 1, they don't talk as they're late and developmentally, you know, my oldest child is 16 and I swear the child never shuts up, never. He came out of the womb talking. Seriously, he never shuts up. I used to have to put him on talking timeouts as a child so I could think, because he would just fill the silence every minute of every day. And I was a stay-at-home mom, and so I would just be like, I can't, okay, I gotta think. And Mrs. Mulder knows she's sitting in the back, she knows that my son, he is a blah, 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 you know, he's very social. Then Trey comes along, and the child never talked, ever. He just watched Ethan. And I thought, okay, well, he's just a little more laid back. He's just a little quieter, you know, whatever. Well, then he just didn't ever talk. And then when he did start talking, it was, and he did that till he was 4. And I was like, okay, something is not right here. I don't know what's going on, but children shouldn't be talking like alien language. It was early warning. You know, he was late compared to his brother. So that should be a major warning sign. Pronunciation problems, speech language problems, when they can't say words that typical. I don't like using the word normal, by the way. Normal versus abnormal. Yucky, bad word, okay? Typical, I would say. Because, you know, I don't want these kids thinking they're abnormal. They're kids. So what if they don't learn like Johnny, they don't learn like Jenny? Okay, who cares? They're not abnormal. I mean, come on now. But anyway, that's just one of my little soapboxes as well. They have slow vocabulary growth. They're often unable to figure out what the word is. My little son, they did a little sight word thing. He was 3. I'll never forget it. They did a little sight word thing to check his IQ. And they showed him a picture of a faucet, you know, with water coming out. And I thought, oh, okay, it's a faucet. He gets a bath every day. You know, we use that word faucet. I don't know. He said, quote, oh, it's the Blooey Blue. It's the Blooey Blue. All right. And that's what he You know, that's what he created in his little, because it had water coming out. It's the Blue Blue. It's kind of our family, you know, running joke right now. It's the Bluey Blue. Difficulty rhyming is a big thing. So if you have a kid that maybe sees a speech and language therapist, they spend a lot of time working on rhyming with these kids because of that. Trouble learning the alphabet, numbers, the days of the week. So memory is an issue for these kiddos. Somebody tell me what time this is over?
2:10.
Oh, good. Okay, great. This is a big one. They're extremely restless and easily distracted. Now listen, we live in a society that is not helpful with children. You know, years ago, the turn of the 20th century, kids got out and they played. Nowadays, they don't. And so then they get to school and they're like, you know, they're like wiggling all over the place. Well, no wonder. They're sitting like deadheads in front of a screen all day long. So I struggle with this one, and I don't agree with the overemphasis and the overdiagnosis of ADHD in our medical and our school system. I believe that ADHD is a problem. It's a neurological disorder, but it is way overdiagnosed, and it's diagnosed by the wrong people. That's a whole nother session. They have trouble. They're social. They're socially backwards, maybe. They don't interact with their peers well. You almost have to teach them how to play. They literally had to teach my son how to play. Because he would parallel play. They call it parallel play. He'd play right next to somebody, but he wouldn't be playing with that somebody. Okay? They just have a difficulty interacting. And they also have, you give them a direction. And you could give 3 directions. If you give 1, 2, 3, they'll remember the first thing, okay? And they'll do the first thing, and they'll probably be very obedient about it, but they won't remember the second. They definitely won't remember the middle. They might remember the tail end of the last one. So with my son Trey, I give him one thing at a time. Okay, go make your bed. He comes back. He's very obedient, but if I give him more than one, forget it. He will remember number 1 and maybe number 18 that I give him, and that is it. Everything in the middle is gone. He will not have heard it. Okay, so this is a major early warning sign in preschool. They start exhibiting these problems early on, y'all. And the earlier we catch them, the better. Then we can come on to kindergarten through 4th grade. And I said earlier that often they really come to light in 4th-ish grade. Does anybody know why? What happens in 4th-ish grade? I hear mumbling, but I'm... Okay, material gets harder, doesn't it? What's that? They're reading to learn. A lot of independent, right? So a teacher says, okay, you're going to have some reading time, silent reading time. You've got to read the 5 pages in your Heritage Studies book. And they go, yeah, and they'll sit there and they'll pretend like they're reading, but they ain't getting nothing, okay? They got nothing. And this is when it really starts to come to light because things get harder for them and it becomes more independent sometimes. And it does manifest itself sometime in these older elementary kiddos. You said 2:15, right? 2:10. Okay, so I'm just wondering why there's people milling around. Okay. Often they're slow to learn the connection between letters and sounds. I had a kiddo that I was working with in the public school, and this poor little kid, he had a form of dyslexia that he could look at a letter, he knew it was an A, but he could never get that the A said ah. Or he also had a problem with numbers. He could recognize a 10. He knew it was a 10. He would say it was a 10. But when he saw the 10 on the paper, he didn't know it was a 10. And he couldn't add it. It was like the most bizarre, so sometimes they just have a hard time connecting those things. They also have a hard time, they confuse basic words. They get, little basic, they get words, mixed up, essentially. Or they make reading and spelling errors often. So when they're reading out loud to you, you're like, honey, no, that's cat. And they're saying dog or, whatever. Or their spelling is always off. They transpose things. In other words, they get things mixed up in math. They often confuse arithmetic signs. Often it's because it's a reading thing. They're not reading the plus or the minus or the times or the divided. They get confused with those signs. It's almost like they can't memorize. They're slow to learn new skills. They often rely heavily on memorization because it comes easy, like for reading especially. So often these little kiddos, they'll ask mom and dad to read the same book over and over again, and then they'll tell mom and dad, oh, let me read this book to you. And they'll read the book. And mom will be like, wow, you are such a good reader, and you're like A+ at the top of the list. You are such a good student. And then he gets to 4th grade, and the teacher comes and tells mom, hey, Johnny can't read. And mom goes, oh, I don't think so. He reads to me all the time. And we find out that little Johnny has memorized everything. They rely on memory often because they don't want to look stupid or feel stupid. They're impulsive. They don't know how to plan. You almost have to teach them step by step by step by step. They're unstable. If they're pencil, they have struggle with fine motor skills. If fine motor skills are an issue, that is an early warning sign, y'all. It's a red flag. It's a major red flag, actually. They struggle to learn about time. I had a little kid that I was dealing with at the public school. He has an intellectual disability. Sweetest little boy. He wants to learn. I did every trick in the book to teach this kid about how to tell time on a clock. And this was 1.5 years ago. I had all these little tricks, all these little visual things. We did fun games. We did everything. I spent 2 weeks with this kid teaching him how to tell time every day for about, half an hour we spent. And we got to the end, and I came to the special ed teacher, and I said, listen, no offense, but you know what? We have analog clocks for a reason. So, or is that what they're called? The digital clocks or whatever. We have digital clocks for a reason. He doesn't need it, okay? He's never going to learn it. They just really struggle sometimes learning about time. And then poor coordination. They are unaware of their surroundings often. They're prone to accidents. So these are some of the warning signs. So let me finish with a few things. What is the big deal? Identifying and acknowledging a student's unique learning challenges is the necessary, if not critical, springboard to appropriately educating and servicing that student. If we don't know, we can't help them. So you as the teacher need to know. It's your job to identify, to look for these things. I keep forgetting them. Do we have to? Do we have to? Well, in a word, no. We're not required to. Federal regulation, the No Child Left Behind idea, which is the Education Act, does not apply to private schools. So, you're out of the woods. You don't have to. Administrators don't have to do anything. And sadly, that is the case often in Christian schooling. And I say shame, shame, shame. Child find is a law that is required in every public school district. They're required by law to go out and find kids that have disabilities in their districts. Often when they have those little children fairs, like the little children's fairs, usually every school district has them. They're looking for kiddos that have issues. They're required by law to find the kiddos that could potentially have disabilities in their school district. And they're required by law to provide those kiddos with services if they qualify for special ed. But shouldn't we as educators want to? And especially as Christian educators. Because see, the academic success of all students, regardless of ability, should be an intrinsic part of policy that coexists in harmony with the mission and values of each school and educator. And I would put in there, Christian. It should be. It should be our heart. Supporting our students with learning disabilities should be the expectation and not the exception in Christian schools. And sadly, it is the exception. So how do we identify and what do you do? If you see red flags, you're not sure about a kid, you're wondering, this is what you can do. First of all, you need to talk to mom and dad, okay? Or dad or mom or whomever is the child's caregivers. You need to do this not by saying, well, I kind of have a hunch, or I feel like, or you know what, maybe. Nope, you have data to back you up. You have watched that child, you have tracked it, you have clearly tracked it, and you say, this is why. And trust me, you don't want to get into the meeting with the parent and you don't have anything to back yourself up, because parents don't like to hear that their kids have a disability. And if you don't have something to back you up, you ain't gonna get anywhere. Okay? So please, please, please do that. Offer solutions to them. Offer tutoring. Offer an intervention maybe, accommodations in the classroom. If you come to some of my other workshops, we'll be talking about those very things. Encourage them to go to the public school. Listen, the public school is required by law to give a full evaluation to any parent who suspects their child has a disability. Okay? It's free. Why not use it? But if they're not comfortable with that, which many parents are not, and I understand that, then I would suggest a psychologist. And then work closely with them and the educational agency, which would be the public school, to create a plan for that student. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in my other workshops. That is what I would say you need to do as a teacher. In order for students with learning disabilities to succeed in the classroom, teachers and parents have got to plan for it. They've got to plan for it. Remember this, always. Learning disabilities are not a prescription for failure. It doesn't mean they're automatically going to fail. With the right kinds of instructions, with the right guidance, with the right support, there are no limits. Did you know Albert Einstein had a learning disability? Albert Einstein. People thought he was an imbecile, told his parents, this kid's an idiot. Thomas Edison. It can be done. But people invested in Albert Einstein. People invested in Thomas Edison, and that's why they got where they were. So the question is, who's in your class? What are you looking for? And how can you be a help?